Okay, I don't think I could have gotten a better transition to what it is I'm trying to say today, because I think this is going to be somewhat basic in a way, but I think our fearless leader here has shown that Jyotisha really is about both karmapala, prediction, but also kaushala, the skillful way of living. And the skillful way of living is to be in alignment with natural law, Dharma. So I wanted to speak to you today about how not only can we see it in the chart of someone, but can we be mini mantris? Can we inspire someone to pursue a Purushartha in a dharmic way, even if it's kama, even if a person is artavid? Can there be dharma to underlie? And so we would want to see the potential for that and suggestions that we might make for that person. So I thought on this very auspicious time, Guru Purnima, we would explore Dharma. So I already know by listening in, this is a very select group. You're very advanced. This may be very basic, but sometimes going back to the basics is good. So the very word Purushartha, so many ways, so much is written, but in the simplest way we can think, it's for the purpose of being a human, for the purpose of being a person. We're all born with all the four Purusharthas, as we'll see, but sometimes one is more alive and others are more sleeping. They're all important, all of them, as we'll see. So I wanted to pull something out of Western psychology to show how Sanatana this idea is of the Purusharthas. So in Western astrology, there's a very famous Abraham Maslow. Probably many of you have heard of him. And he had this hierarchy of human needs, but they're not just human needs, at least not the first part of it. It's the need of every living creature. And so the pyramid starts with the physiological needs. Every living creature needs to have food of some kind, water of some kind, and warmth, whatever, to secure their life. I remember Hart, my Guru Hart, stepped out of his apartment one day, and outside the apartment was one of these woven mats. And you know how woven mats are, they have little holes and they can collect dirt, etc. And in one of those little holes was a seedling. And the seedling was growing bent towards the sun. And he said to himself, even this seedling has the intelligence to know that the source of its life is the light of the sun. And that inspired him actually to come and give this talk on Purusharthas. So the physiological needs and the safety needs, we'll see how this correlates in a minute. Once that's secured for someone, then the social interactions, the friends, the intimate relationships, the sense of belonging, that's a very important piece. And that gives rise to more feeling good about oneself, the esteem needs, so to speak. And eventually, the person yearns for the concept that Maslow called self-actualization, of the sort of wholeness where one was secure, not just because their physiological needs are met, but because they were grounded in their own self. So this may sound very familiar. Again, I'm talking to a sangha of people who grew up with these ideas. But as I said, it's good to understand and realize as you're doing charts to think about your natives. So Artha would correspond to both the physiological and safety needs. And then once they're secured, to the social needs and even desires and their fulfillment and all of that. And that's very important also. And animal kingdom, plant kingdom, even plants after a very dry period, if it rains, you could almost feel them sighing with delight. They plump out. So they have kama as well. And obviously without kama, we don't reproduce. So these are all very important. However, human beings can sometimes get these mixed up. It's called credit card debt. They go into debt for enjoyment, and then they have a lot of problems in their life. The difference between the self-reflective human being and the plant and animal kingdom starts with Dharma. So Dharma is where the turn towards a life that's fulfilling and eventually a life that brings us to that ultimate freedom. So today we're going to discuss the Purushartha of Dharma. Now, the pyramid gives us Artha, Kama, Dharma, Moksha. But the tradition says something very different in terms of the order of importance. And we could see that difference when we look at a chart. And I apologize here, I just have a North Indian chart for the moment, but everything else will have both. I like this just because I like to show the trines. So this, of course, in the North Indian chart is the East, and so this is the Lagna. And the Indian tradition teaches us that the first thing is Dharma. A person must be in sync, in line with natural law. And the signal of that is, it is the first bhava. And in fact, there's a beautiful Dharma trine, which is again why I just wanted to show it to you this way. And so we all know that the 159 are the trines of Jupiter. And we'll see later, of course, that Jupiter is Dharma Kataka. So the houses of grace, right? The 159, the Lakshmi sthanas, they are the houses of punya and grace. And so we as human beings with Dharma as integrated, hopefully, as part of our very being, this is the path that we should follow. Even if the other Purusharthas might be dominant, we want them underlain by Dharma, the conversion of that thief in Sunil's story. So these would be the Artha trines. These are the Kama trines. Again, I know I'm probably speaking to people who are much well-versed than I am, but it's good to look at the basics. Okay, so now, Dharma. What are the attributes of Dharma, a person who is dharmic? Well, we would say, I think, that they're aligned with natural law, not necessarily man-made law. A lot of man-made law going on these days is, in fact, not in alignment with natural law. Sometimes it's the strict letter of the law that is harsh, rather than the spirit of the law, which is more natural law. Dharma also can be thought of in terms of the simple golden rule. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. When we follow Dharma, that's our orientation. And of course, that translates into ahimsa. So the dharmic person is ahimsa. Maybe less known is that people who are Dharmavid are also very good at strategy and planning. So that is another attribute of Dharma Purushartha. Oh yes, of course, in Punya, grace. Now, where do we see Dharma in a chart? The first, the fifth, and the ninth bhavas, as I've already shown, are the Dharma sthanas. But we also need to look to the first, the fifth, and the ninth lords. And we need to look to Jupiter, the Dharma Karaka. Of the Dharma sthanas, the ninth bhava is the highest seat of Dharma. Now, how would you evaluate it? Sunil said, I like to teach in I don't consider it a highly structured way, because I think that pro formas are elastic. You know, they give an organization, but you can also stretch them like a rubber band. If you stretch them too far, it breaks and then it's worthless. But it gives guidelines, especially to students who are starting. It gives them an orientation. So a Dharma pro forma might go along these lines if you're teaching this particular topic, or even if you're reminding yourself as you're looking at a chart. So the first thing is the Lagna Lord in the Dharma sthana? So if we're looking for a person who's Dharma vid, the Lagna Lord, of course, representing the self. Now, this isn't cause for people to think, my Dharma Lord, my Lagna Lord, my Lagnesha, it's not a Dharma sthana. I think I'm a Dharmic person. We don't want to kind of get hysterical like this. It's just a lead. If the Lagna Lord is in a Dharma sthana, it's good then to follow through on the pro forma especially, and to see how powerful that is. Is this the leading Purushartha for this person? And not everyone will have a leading Purushartha. They may be balanced, which in a way is the ideal, because they're all important. It is important for us to have security. It is important to us to have some joy in our life. It is important for us to be dharmic, and it is important enough to be moving in the direction of moksha. Okay, so this is the first signal, we could say. Then following up on this is in the order of importance. Are Dharma Lords in the Dharma sthanas themselves? This will give even a stronger impulse towards Dharma in that person's life. I also need to say that some people may have Dharma combinations, but if they're afflicted or exaggerated in some way, or the Lagna Lord is, they may follow false dharmas, cults and things like that. They're waving the flag of Dharma, but it isn't really the self-reflection that we're looking for a person who's truly in sync with natural law. If they're not in Dharma sthanas, or if they are in Dharma sthanas, are they in sambandha? Are they related to each other? Are they yuti? Are they mutual drishti? It's also possible to stimulate Dharma if the Dharma Lords are aspecting Dharma sthanas and other Dharma Lords. Even if a Dharma Lord's not in a Dharma sthana, is it aspecting into it? Is it in sambandha with another Dharma Lord? So these are all in descending order of importance, but still considerations. And then, of course, very important is the role of Dharma Karaka, Jupiter, in a chart. Now, we're thinking of Jupiter now as a Karaka, as an enhancer. And so if Jupiter becomes both the Lord of a Dharma sthana and is the enhancer of Dharma, it has a doubly important role. And that would make a person even more inclined towards this all-important Purushartha. And then finally, are the Dharma Lords linked or in sambandha outside of the Dharma sthanas? This would be a weaker presentation, but still something important. And it's not going to be the only thing. This is something that is a very handy guideline. There are other considerations, and this one is very important, and that is the dasha sequence. Because whatever Purushartha the dasha Lord is signaling, that may be a temporary orientation of that person. So we could think about someone who's sowing their wild oats, either in a karma sense or in a artha sense, and they're impelled because the dasha lord running is signaling that. But they also have a lot of dharma going on in their chart as well. And the next dasha might be one that brings that into their life. So this isn't static. It always has to be considered in a dynamic way as well. Other thing is there can be confluence for dharma based on some of the nakshatras that are dominant in the chart. Pusha nakshatra comes to mind. Very dharmic, letter of the law. And their other nakshatras are similar. And this is also true when we're investigating the other purusharthas. Okay, so with this all in place, let's look at least a couple of charts, perhaps more than a couple, to see how this might work. So this is the chart of a woman. And my students all say that I like to use sanitized charts. So sanitized in the sense that the principle is illustrated as clearly as possible. And so I love to present in that same way, especially in a short session like this. So if we go back to the very first idea, is the Lagnesha in a Dharmasthana? Then clearly we see that the moon is in the ninth. And this isn't the strongest moon that ever came up the pike. It's on the darkish side. So it's not a really strong, bright moon, but it has a helping hand. This moon is with Jupiter. Jupiter is the dispositor of the moon, and it's with the moon, and it's forming a Parvati Yoga out of Paladipika. Mantreshvara is Parvati Yoga. When the dispositor of the Lagnesha is Swara exalted in a Kendra Trikona, it's a helper. It's a lean, I call it the lean on me yoga. It's as if moon is leaning on that strong dispositor to help its strength, and therefore allow this person to actualize the promise of the chart. So we're off to a good start. We will pursue the Purushartha of Dharma. And then our next question, our primary question, are the Dharma Lords in Dharmasthanas? And once again, you're a very high-level group, so you can see very clearly that all the Dharma Lords are in a Dharmasthana. And then not only are they in a Dharmasthana, they're in the highest seat of Dharma. And in that Dharmasthana is the Dharma Kataka, Jupiter, who is now going to double as the Dharma Lord of the highest seat of Dharma, and the Dharma Kataka, who is in a Dharmasthana. So, sometimes it sounds like, well, haven't you already said that? No. The trick, or the skill, I should say, is how many ways can you see whatever your point of inquiry is supported, and how many ways it's supported. The Lagna Lord is in a Dharmasthana, supported one way. The Lords of the 5th and the 9th are in Dharmasthanas, 2 more independent variables. Jupiter, the Kataka for Dharma, is in a Dharmasthana, another independent variable. We've got 5 confirmations on this. And they are all in the highest seat of Dharma. So you might think this would be a rather dharmic person. You might be surprised at who this particular person is. Well, I'll unveil in just a moment. Let's look at her dasha sequence. It's a woman. So her dasha sequence also signals. How does it signal? Well, she runs, of course, Mercury initially, Kamasthana. And then she runs Ketu, Kamasthana. Very wild as a young woman and adolescent. And then she moves into her Venus dasha. It's still the Lord of a Kamasthana. It's also the Lord of a Mokshasthana, but it's sitting in a bhava of Dharma. Now, this isn't a guarantee, but what helps the 20 years that she was in her Venus dasha is the powerful aspect of Jupiter. In fact, Shastra tells us if Venus is in the Lagna, aspected by Jupiter, it's a Raj Yoga. And so she has this Raj Yoga. And in my classes, I name this Raj Yoga because many yogas, as you know, in the Shastra don't have names. It's hard for people to remember them without a name. So I give little nicknames to some of the Raj Yogas that we see frequently. And this particular Raj Yoga is known as, in our particular Sangha, the Angelina Jolie Raj Yoga. What? This actress is Dharmavid? Oh, yes. If you know anything about Angelina Jolie, she has shamed a lot of the Hollywood people into becoming, I mean, it's wonderful that they're donors. You know, the money is very, very important. But this woman goes to earthquake zones. She goes to hurricane zones. She goes to places where people are in famine. She's lived in Africa. She's worked in the fields with those women. She puts her money where her mouth is. And she has visited the Pope. She has visited world leaders. She has advocated for the needy and the poor. And this is her life's work. She is a UN ambassador of goodwill. You might not know that about her. She even impelled, while she was married to Brad Pitt, he found himself, building houses, in New Orleans from Hurricane Katrina, and was completely on this Dharma bandwagon. And she pursues it in a very active way. She kind of pulled back on all of that when she entered her Venus dasha in her Sun dasha. There were a lot of problems in her life, it's divorce in her life, etc. She's now in her Moon dasha. So it'd be interesting to see if she resurfaces, so to speak. So I wanted to put forward someone I consider, or you might consider unlikely, as a paradigm of Dharma, to show that, in fact, she is, and it's very active. These are very active grahas here, very alive, very awake. All right, let's look at another example. So I think this will strike you all right away as, once again, the Lagna Lord is in the Lagna, and it's Jupiter. So the Dharma bell should be ringing very loud. It's not just any Jupiter. It's a very powerful Jupiter. It's obviously Swasta. It's obviously Digbala, but it's also Ragotama, qualified Ragotama. So there's a huge amount of dignity and beauty to this Jupiter. And then, of course, the other Dharma Lords would be the moon, Swasta. It's a dark moon, but it's a Dharma Lord, that's Swasta. In the fifth bhava, its own bhava. And then also Mars, very powerful ninth Lord, who's not in the Dharmasthana. And so deliberately, I wanted to use this chart, to illustrate it doesn't have to be. So here we have two of the Dharma Lords are in Dharmasthanas. Jupiter, Dharma Lord, is aspecting all the other Dharmasthanas, so activating all of them. It's so important. If Jupiter is a Dharma Lord in a Dharmasthana, it winds up gluing together all of the Dharmasthanas. And Mars, although not in the pattern, is in Sambandha, full mutual drishti, with the fifth Lord, and is aspecting into the fifth house, completing the Purushartha of Dharma in a very convincing way. It's a beautiful chart, isn't it? And this is the chart of the world famous Prabhupada. So if you aren't familiar with Prabhupada, she's a Pulitzer Prize winner. Her father was a Christian missionary, in China. She was actually born in the US, but at 2 months old, the family went back to China. And she became embarrassed as she grew up that her father would interfere with what was a beautiful culture in many ways. And she actually broke with the whole idea of missionaries. She felt that that was, if they were there to break up the cultural integrity of wherever they were, their religion, etc. And we know that this has been a problem in many places in the world. So she was very against that. The father actually had the vision to send her back to the States for her college years. And this is something that just didn't happen to women born in the late 1800s or around the turn of the century. But he did that. He was all for education. He probably rued it later on. But as a child growing up in China, he also did something unusual. She went to schools along with the Chinese girls, Chinese students, rather than to the missionary school. So strict as he might have been, he was a big force in creating who she became. And she quickly noticed that the girls' feet were being bound so that they would have small feet, and it was very painful. And so she advocated for the rights of these women, much to the dislike of the Chinese government as she grew older. But perhaps her most important, that's what the Good Earth was about, by the way, that she won the prize for. But her biggest advocacy was when Chinese women would marry or even not marry foreigners, particularly Americans. The US did not allow those soldiers to bring Chinese wives back to the US. They had to stay in China, and so did the children. And so the children very often wound up in orphanages, and she wound up creating a worldwide network of hospitality houses, of orphanages, and was an advocate for people in various countries to be able to adopt children from any culture all over the world. And it became one of the largest and most beautiful ways of saving children from otherwise disaster in their lives. For that, she was cut off from the church that her father preached at and all of that. A huge Dharma chart here, just beautiful. I would be very remiss if I didn't put this forward. Maybe I should have put it forward first. But the reason that I didn't, I'll explain to you in just a minute. Sunil, tell me when I'm getting too close to my time up, okay? Because you know me, I could go on. So in this chart, once again, we're looking for Lagna Lord. And here, the Lagna Lord, of course, is Saturn. And Saturn has gone right to the 9th house, hugely strong, exalted, and retrograde. So then we want to look, where are the other Dharma Lords? Well, we see the Lord of the 5th in the Lagna, and also very strong. Again, an idea of a triple strength in a way, because Mercury is also Vargotama. So retrograde, Digbala, and Vargotama, hugely strong 5th Lord. 9th Lord is exalted. And I wanted to show this to you because this is a case where the 9th Lord is not really looking back into any of the other Dharma sthanas, but not for a minute would you entertain that this is not a hugely dharmic chart, given the power of everything we're seeing. Also, when we look at Dharma Kataka, who here, Jupiter is not the owner of a Dharma sthana, is it? No. But it is in a Dharma sthana. And once again, when Jupiter is in a Dharma sthana, whether it's also a Dharma Lord or not, it will glue together all of the other Dharma sthanas, especially if it's strong and unafflicted. And so we look at this powerful Lagna Lord in the 9th, strong and only stabilized, only aspected by a beautiful, strong Jupiter, who in turn is utterly unafflicted. It's very beautiful. And then the big, huge power of this chart is it all repeats. I didn't go through all the repeating in the other examples, but you can do that on your own. So this is a perfect Sudarshana Lagna. Everything repeats from the sun. Everything repeats from the moon. Huge dharmic chart. Even Dasha sequence, yes, it starts in moon. The moon is in Jupiter star, Purvabhadrapada. So he starts his life, this particular person, in Jupiter, and already has unbelievably incredible visions and experiences, and then on to Saturn and Mercury. Although life was short in that sense. And then, of course, this is Ramakrishna Paramahansa. Beautiful illustration of Dharma. So, Neil, how are we doing?
Ma'am, it's going great.
Pardon me?
It's going great, ma'am.
Okay, no, just time-wise.
No, you can continue, you can complete.
Okay, so I'll do one more. Kind of in a similar league. And that would be this particular chart. So a similar idea, a little bit different spin. So I want to show it to you that way. Once again, if we look at our Lagna Lord is Mercury in the first bhava, signaling Dharma. Who are the other Dharma Lords? Saturn, Swasta in the ninth bhava, hugely strong. Once again, no affliction to Saturn, like Ramakrishna's chart. Jupiter, again, not a Dharma Lord, but Dharma Kataka, gluing everything together and aspecting that beautiful ninth Lord. Okay, are they in Sambandha, these Dharma Lords? Well, Mercury is not in Sambandha, but it is still in its own first bhava. Saturn has Sambandha with Venus, the fifth Lord. Venus is not in a Dharmasthana, and that is not an absolute requirement, but it does have Sambandha, and it aspects back into. So it's looking at the ninth bhava as the fifth Lord. It's looking at the ninth Lord as the fifth Lord, completing this circle of Dharma. And Jupiter, once again, gluing it all together. So it has a kind of similar feel, doesn't it, to the chart we just looked at of Ramakrishna. And it's amusing, I think, that it's the chart of the Dalai Lama. Such powerful Dharma Lords here. Okay, so I would be very happy to answer any questions. I think I'm right in my time. Yeah. Maybe I'll go out of sharing so that I could see you all. Hello, me too, and Lizzie.
Sorry.
This is a part of the Ragtag Group that I call my students. They're not. They're wonderful. And Susan, who else is here peeking in on me? Any questions? Be happy to answer.
Any questions? Anybody?
So can I ask?
Yes, please ask.
The thing is, whatever you explained, it was very clear, very crystal clear. I have a chart which has like all the Dharma Corners. Like, do you want to just see and let me see like what I got from you, whether it is for a match? Do we have that? Or like, okay, I just want to say that in the first house, fifth house and ninth house lords are together. That means Dharma Triconas are together in the sixth house. And is, yeah, so does that house like have the impact, negative impact, or?
Not necessarily. A lot of it will depend on the condition. of those Dharma Lords in the sixth bhava. And I remember, so maybe this will, a little story, you know, Sunya likes to tell stories, I like to tell stories. I remember I was going to a lecture, and there's all this talk about you should be desireless. You know, there's this idea of having desires is no good. And so it happened in this lecture. It was with a great Swami Dayananda Saraswati, who's my Vedanta guru. He happened that day to actually be talking about this. And he talked about the distinction between the Purushartha of Kama and Raga. So there's a difference between Raga, which is craving, and Kama, which is having desires. We wouldn't eat if we didn't have desire. As I said, we wouldn't procreate. We wouldn't do any of those. There's nothing wrong with desire. And then he was specifically asked, you know, what about it if there's, you know, a collection of grahas in places of great desire, or of artha, which is what the sixth bhava is. It's an artha sthana. So from this point of view, he said, your desires should be for dharma. If they're also Dharma Lords, so you're telling me that it's all the Dharma Lords, but they're in the sixth bhava, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you should desire to be of service, a good sixth bhava meaning. If you are in a career like law, where sixth bhava is a very good bhava for lawyers, then when you do your profession of law, you should keep in mind that you should be following natural law, you know, rather than bending law in crooked ways. Do you see what I mean? So depending on the see, the thing is, think about the chart as an ecosystem, and everybody's ecosystem is different. So you could have a beautiful, beautiful plant. You can pay a lot of money for that. It was bred to be like this and that. And you put it in your garden and it flourishes. It's beautiful. Someone else buys the same plant, puts it in their garden, and it doesn't last 2 weeks. Why? Because the ecosystem is different. So the ecosystem of a chart will support the outcome of any particular combination. And
we
so,
have the same Deshkal Patra.
yes, exactly.
Equivalent to that. Yeah.
But it isn't just Kala Desha Patra. It's not only that. That's part of the ecosystem. It's also all of what is the Lagna? What are the other grahas doing? Do you see? So it's ecosystem is a holistic thing. But absolutely, Kala Desha Patra is huge.
Yeah. And one more question to this, whether the aspect of Saturn on these three graha also going to stop the person to do dharma?
Not if Saturn is a Dharma Lord. Not if Saturn is very well aspected, maybe one way aspected by Jupiter without any affliction. This is what I mean by ecosystem. You have to know who is that Saturn. Saturn has a very constructive side. Saturn still, even with constructive, you could have the most constructive Saturn that there is, but it's still Saturn. There may still be delays. There may be still, but it may not be a complete obstruction. So this is the problem with not realizing that the grahas have many different hats, and you have to figure what hat is that graha wearing in that particular context of which question you're asking. It's never an all-time thing. Nothing will be the same for every question. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. One quick, this thing, there are any questions, please ask right now. Okay. Saranj, could you just type it in the chat box, answering the question of Lalita. Dalai Lama has Saturn retrograde Swagrahi in the 9th house, if the chart is to be believed to be correct. And also in the Sashtyamsha, yes, that same Saturn retrograde in the 9th house of Dharma. The retrogression shows the struggle and what all is done. You know. So something food for thought, I believe Dalai Lama's chart. Yes, Saranj, have you?
I think you're on mute because I'm not hearing.
Saranj, have you typed your question in the chat box? Oh, you can't type. Okay, all right. Can you unmute yourself?
Sir, chat box is disabled.
Oh, my. Oh, I'm so sorry. Now I understand.
Thank you.
Please continue your question on the. No, you can continue here. Ask here.
Yeah, please.
Hi, ma'am. I just need to know one thing. You told that eighth lord is Mars. Are we considering eighth lord is also eighth sign is also ruled by Rahu?
Um, so Rahu, in this particular vichara, we're not going to consider rulership.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. If there are no more questions, I really must thank Penny ji to remove her time out from her busy schedule. And thank you for bringing us back to Dharma. Most of us go into some other path because of the mundane activities.
Well, you gave me that perfect segue into this because I was trying to think how to move from the discussions into something very basic like the Purushartas, and then you couldn't have introduced it in a more charming and relevant way. So thank you for that, Sunil. Thank you, everybody. Hariom.
Wonderful examples. Because as you were talking, I was quietly opening Angelina Jolie's chart in a D60 in the 9th house. Mars and Rahu shows the earthquake victims, etc., that she's been doing. So my real love is D60, which Parashar Rishi 7 has given far more higher points than Rashi and Navamaj, 5 points in the Shadvarga scheme and the other schemes he has given. So any which ways, thank you so much, Penny ji, once again.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Office can stop the recording.